The opinions expressed in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Time Warner Cable.
I'd like to call the board meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, I'd ask Andrew Becker to read our mission statement.
We educate all students to be college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed in our diverse world.
Thank you, Andrew. Next is our open forum time. This is an opportunity for members of the public to share information with the Board of Education. Prior to starting your comments, please provide your name and address, and please keep your comments to 5 minutes. We will have a timer to help people stay on track. Also, please know that Wisconsin's open meetings law prohibits the board from discussing matters brought during the public participation period of the meeting agenda. If the board would want any additional or clarifying information from you, a member of the administration will be in contact with you to follow up on behalf of the board. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak before the board? Seeing none, we will move to roll call. Sandy?
Becker?
Here.
Dorf?
Here.
Dan?
Here.
Maloney?
Here.
McCoy?
Excused?
Wager?
Here.
Warren?
Here.
Sinclair? Here. Mitchell? Here.
6 board members are present tonight. 1 is excused. To my left is Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, and to my far left is our board secretary, Sandy Heller, and to my right are 2 intercity student council members. Grace Sinclair is our president. She's from Preble High School, and Japresha Mitchell is from Southwest High School. Welcome, Japresha. Feel free to participate, ask questions. If you have information you'd like to share, whatever, all of that is good. Next, I would entertain a motion to approve the following minutes. Regular board meeting August 21st, 2017. Special board meetings August 28th, August 23rd, August 28th, September 11th, 2017. Special board meeting closed session September 11th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The minutes have been approved. And let's see. First, I'd like to make an announcement that if people would like to follow along, whether it's here or even at home, you can view the board agenda and handouts by visiting the district website, which is www.gbaps.org. You can click on our district and then Board of Education. On the left menu, you will find a link to agendas and minutes. This link will take you to a website called Neptune, where all board agendas, minutes, and handouts from today's board meeting and also past board meetings are housed. Next, we'll move to our monitoring reports, and that will be facilitated by Julie Jansch.
I believe we're going to be doing a achievement gap reduction report, and I thought they're going to, or commonly known as AGR.
And formerly known as SAGE.
SAGE, okay, I did not know that. That's
Or it's not the same program, but it
Right.
replaced
To
SAGE.
replace Sage. Good evening, members of the board. Dr. Langenfeld, thank you for this opportunity to share with you the end of the school year Achievement Gap Reduction Board Report. Achievement Gap Reduction, also known as AGR, in 2015, Wisconsin Act 53 was passed into law. It is formally known as the SAGE, or Student Achievement Guaranteed in Education Act. Currently, we have 9 schools that are participating. They are Dan's, Eisenhower, Fort Howard, Howe, Jefferson, Lincoln, Nicolay, Tank, and Sullivan. You'll see in the achievement report that was submitted to you on August 23rd, you'll also see that the Early Learning Center is included in that. We're allowed to include the children that feed into Sullivan, Dan's, and Eisenhower. Achievement Gap Reduction focuses on 3 main areas. It's low socioeconomic status, also known as SES, also reading and math achievement, and then closing the achievement gap between identified low SES students and non-identified students. And that is all outlined in our state statutes. When we moved from SAGE, which the main focus of SAGE was low class size, to AGR, it really was about continuous school improvement, where the focus was on learning, collaboration amongst highly effective teams, and then a focus on the results, what's happening actually in our schools and in our classrooms every day. The 3 high leverage strategies that we now are able to implement is one-to-one or small group instruction. That's our intervention. Also instructional coaching. As you know, we have bilingual instructional coaches. In addition to that, we have literacy coaches in all of our elementary classrooms. And it really is, our elementary schools, it's really about the collaboration that is done around the universal. So when we talk about universal, it's really about increased professional growth and practices, taking on the learning, going from theory, putting it into practice. And then the last one is the K-3 class size ratio, and that is 1 to 18 or 2 to 30. The state did include that you now, if you're going to only do class size ratios, that you do have to provide professional development on small group differentiation in the tier 1 or universal classroom. We did some school analysis and planning. The data that you have in front of you that was submitted to you on August 23rd, but then also posted for this board meeting on Neptune, includes baseline, mid-year, and end-of-the-year data. We included all 3 of those data points because it's really an evaluation of the teaching and learning throughout the school year. Then also included were individual school progress reports that principals and the building leadership teams reported out on strategy implementation and achievement data from each individual school. The 2017-18 strategic assessment system, we're really looking at, are we meeting the learning needs of all of our students, and how do we know? We're looking at curriculum data, but we'll be including STAR data. STAR will be included 3 times a year in the report to the board. Curriculum data that will be included are all of the different formative and progress monitoring and summative assessments that are given at a school level. And we're asking board members to meet when you are at your site visits, to meet with principals and to ask principals for that data, that curriculum data, right at the school. They'll also be able to give you information on professional practice goals that many of them in our AGR schools have also set. We also did a deeper analysis and action planning around where our gaps in learning are with our subgroups. Even though the state statute is it's about low socioeconomic status, we included all of our subgroups, special education, non-identified special education. We also looked at different ethnicities
and then also at the different languages that our students were being taught in. So our bilingual students, and then also our classrooms where it was English only. And you'll see that that is all disaggregated and pulled out by district level, but then also by school level. So we intentionally disaggregated data so that we could really take a look at a deeper planning process to really close the achievement gap between all of those subgroups. Any questions on AGR or in the report that was given to you on the 23rd of August, but then also posted on Neptune on Friday?
Chris?
A couple of questions, if I may. First, I just three of them. And first one is, how long has the current evaluation instrument been used? Second one, how were the benchmarks set? And third, find some bright spots for me in the data that I see in those reports.
So the benchmark that were set is the curriculum data, that the curriculum assessments that we use, they are benchmark. They're benchmark beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of the year. So when you see if they met the proficiency, depending upon the curriculum assessment.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask that question right. What I was looking for is who set the standard on what's proficient or not?
Sure. So the publishers of the assessments, the curriculum assessments, whether it's the BAS benchmark assessment system, which is by Fontes and Pinnell, whether it is the AVMR data that was used, the assessment and then the collection of the data, or Lucy Calkins' writing assessment. All of those are benchmarked by the publishing company. So they're researched. Lucy Calkins' work comes out of Teachers College, out of New York, and she's in many high poverty schools. So everything has been benchmarked. Nancy, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job. We follow the norms as set, and those are usually national norms because these are nationally used assessments. And so the benchmarks are set by the publishing companies, and those are the norms that we set, that we follow. And as soon as we start exceeding those norms, we'll be establishing our own district norms as we move forward.
Okay, if I may, a little bit more of that general information here. The instrument that's being used is set by the company who normed it across the country. Are all districts within Wisconsin using this instrument, and are all states using this instrument?
For the reading and the
For the
writing and the
assessment.
mathematics, that's local control. Your local school district can choose what measures they choose to use.
So we can't really compare ourselves with the rest of the state? Is that what you're saying by that?
Not for AGR, not for our curriculum assessments. We could say that for any assessment other than the state assessment. The state assessment that is required by the state is the only assessment that I know that is being used by every school district in the state.
So we could either set this higher or lower? You said
Yes,
we could go do what
absolutely.
we want with it?
We would prefer to keep at least what's expected as far as our curriculum, as far as our content essential learnings and our standards that are set. We will at least meet that level. And then as we progress in our practice and our learning, I do see us succeeding in setting a higher benchmark.
You're comfortable with the testing company?
Oh, they're aligned with the same set of standards that we follow.
Okay.
The standards are pretty much the same, very little tweaking within either the the English Language Arts standards or the math standards. So I'm extremely comfortable with I'm just not familiar that I don't want to go on record saying every state is using Advantage Math Recovery as an assessment. I can certainly share with you and follow up with you with the states that are using it and the school districts in Wisconsin that have adopted it, as well as our reading assessments that are very commonly used across the country.
So just going back 1 second to make sure we understand it. What we're doing here, we're not trying to compare our kids with other kids in the state.
No.
At all. And we can't do that, nor can we truly compare them with other kids in the country because not everybody's taking this test.
Well, the beautiful part about these assessments that we use for curriculum, they're really centered around anticipated growth that align with the standards that have been adopted by the state. So they really are a way of monitoring students' growth as they meet the
Okay,
expected outcome.
I asked to find some bright spots in the data, and, it didn't look the best to me. Maybe that's why I'm asking for bright spots. So if people look at that and they're saying, oh my gosh, we're not doing very well compared to everybody else. I mean, that might be the initial take on it. So that's what I'd like you to respond to on the data.
And I appreciate this, if you don't mind, Andrea. I'd like to address that in June and July, we did present the board with our English language arts data and our math data. And we did highlight the outstanding next steps for us that we know we have to address, and those that we felt were very much a positive and moving in the right direction. And as far as, for our math scores, we definitely know we are in our third year of using Advantage Math Recovery to measure how students learn and what they do have control of, as well as implementing a pilot of a new math curriculum that very much centered around rigorous and high problem solving and inquiry based. So those are pieces that we very much were aware of our deficits, and knowing that we took a deep look at our instructional practices as well as the resources that were available to our teachers. The same would go at the elementary level, since this is an elementary report, would be around our English language arts. The board adopted grade level, the classroom libraries, which allows us to implement our new curriculum in reading, where children have eyes on text for a longer period of time, reading at their level, where the teacher pushes it in conferences with each teacher, anecdotal notes, scaffolds their learning immediately. So the data, though shall I say that it is not anywhere near where we would hope it would be, we have made significant changes between when this data was collected and even since we've reported in June and July. We've begun that work. And that's why I appreciate Andrea saying that when you visit our schools, please meet with the building principal and let them go through their individual school data with you and bring you right into the classrooms where you would see this in action and how they would be measuring this. And I think that's really, that really resonates then with the really heavy lifting that we're asking our teachers and the intentional teaching we're asking our teachers to do every single day, and the decision making that they're making to help our children meet these identified benchmarks.
I think, Dr. Wigner, when you asked about comparative data, that's why I stated we're moving to STAR 3 times a year to actually, and that will be kindergarten through 5th grade, to actually be able to, and I'm sorry, in kindergarten, it will be STAR early literacy, but then in 1st through 5th grade, it will be STAR reading and STAR math. It will allow you to look at data across multiple schools and to compare the data, how the children are progressing and what type of growth we're seeing. When we look at the curriculum data like Ms. Chartier talked about, it's really about we're looking at what's happening at that classroom level, and we connect it back to instructional practices. Some of the bright spots you're going to see at Fort Howard, one of our highest poverty schools, where 92% of their kindergarten children met the reading benchmark for the end of the year. You're also seeing at Tank 78% of those students met the reading benchmark. When you look at curriculum data, you're really looking at how prepared are those children at the end of the year to take on, starting in that next year, to take on the learning and the demands that are required of them through the curriculum resources that are provided for the teachers.
One final question, if I may. So you all feel fairly confident that the interventions that are going to be in place now, that we'll see some reasonable results with improvement with our students?
Yes, sir, and if we don't, we'll be back letting you know that we're making changes because of the facts that we found in enough substantial evidence.
I
It's just
worry
not
that
over time.
we've had a lot of changes through the years,
Yeah.
and we're still seem to be stuck. So that's my concern with that. Thank you.
Within the report, going school by school, the goals all seem to be, I don't say general, but lack of a better word, general in terms of percent of students meeting benchmarks across the board. I'm looking for, and if it's in there, I'm not, I need some help. Where are the goals or where are the data points specifically to closing the gaps? I mean, where do I find that in the reports?
You're going to see in the school success plans beginning this year that we have worked with principals, asking them to include in their success plans around the action plans, looking at closing the achievement gap data. And many of them have already put in goals around not just low SES, AGR, all of them qualify for AGR based on their socioeconomic status, but across the board, asking them to really look at gap closing
I
goals.
thought we had talked about this last year, though, and I guess I anticipated seeing that there would be something in the report this year specific again to that gap closing. I mean, that's achievement gap reduction, but I don't see it in here. What am I missing here?
Are you asking, are they setting high leverage action steps? Are they doing something with professional practice or looking at those kids? The data is
No, I'm looking for the
disaggregated.
data that show that the gap is closing. That's what I'm looking for.
This isn't a current report. That we haven't collected that data yet, and at the board's request, we'll be using STAR data to bring that gap closing presentation when we report out on this year's data.
This is data
This is
from
just
May, the end of May.
Correct.
And this is just the required report that we
Right.
have to send to DPI.
Correct.
This is what they require.
That is correct.
So we
So
can,
our reports coming are those school improvement plans that we're going to be
Correct.
seeing through the
Correct.
year,
Yes.
that will have plans for closing achievement gaps. We'll
Yeah.
use STAR data instead of
Correct.
the BAS and
Yes.
the writing too.
they'll include, they'll be using curriculum data, but so that's the
That's-
internal, the curriculum assessments, but they'll be using STAR as an external monitor to look at how is it normed, how are we doing in comparison to the children in the United States.
So for AGR, the
This
state is
what
not
the state
requiring
requires.
gap reduction data?
Sure, you'll see all of the gap reduction, you'll see that it's reported out based on how they performed, baseline, mid-year, and end of the year. It's all on there under each individual school.
I see that, but
Yeah,
I mean.
so
the-
then you're asking, are they setting goals based on that data? And yes, we'll include that. All of our staff will include, our schools will be looking at, we are always looking at especially special education, and then looking at low socioeconomic status. But we disaggregate even further than that. We go down to ethnicity, we go down to the language they're learning, because we know that there are lots of reasons why there is an achievement gap between the different subgroups. So what I hear you asking is, are we setting specific goals on that data? And yes, starting this year, we will be.
If I could follow up though with that, Andrea, if I look at Fort Howard, for example, and I look at the summary, and I can see in that summary, they talk about focused on structured academic conversations, but then they
Right.
get into their school improvement plan, and they talk about how they looked at and questioned if they were meeting their student in their zone of proximal development. School improvement team looked at the data, analyzed the data, drilled down 37 or 3637. I would assume that would be standard process throughout the course of the school year, looking at the data. Having been in those schools and spent time looking at data walls and being shown these things, that's the piece that I would offer that I see.
They're looking at what are the practices that we need to put in place to help support the achievement gap. Then they monitor that.
Right, but you can also see when they start shifting students out of different buckets,
Yes,
and they jump 2 buckets.
Yeah.
I don't know what they call them,
proficiency levels.
Proficiency levels,
Yep,
I
on
call
their
them, but-
assessment walls.
But you can see them on their assessment
Yes.
walls. Having sat with the Department of Public Instruction and with teams to
Right.
have that conversation. So I would assume that's a practice that's not
Mhm.
just occurring in one school. I've been in a couple that
Abs-
I've had this demonstrated
Right.
to me.
Absolutely.
What is most important is that you're looking at baseline data. So you're looking, especially in our high poverty schools, you're looking at the group of kids that you're working with. That who came to you in the fall of the current year. And you're looking at how are they progressing. And if you're closing that achievement gap, you're really increasing the rate of learning for those students who everyone's making proficiency, but you have to be thinking about what are the systems you're putting in place to increase the rate of learning for those students who we call low progressing. And then we analyze that by subgroup. And you see that in this data. Stephen Miller and Josh Patrick from the technology department have done a great job of creating programs to help us actually analyze that data. Brenda?
So to follow up with Ed's question about the achievement gap, this is report 1, is that, this is the first time?
This is report 3. So we came to the board at the beginning of the school year, then we came in April.
Oh, no, I mean, is this the first year? When did we start having to provide these AGR reports to DPI?
I'm sorry. This is our second year.
Okay.
Yes.
At some point, because all this shows you is year by year, so you can see that we have bigger gaps in reading.
Whether it's being closed, it's not
We
there.
have bigger gaps in reading than we have in math, but that's just for 1 year.
So you're
So at
asking-
some point, do they have, year by
Yes.
year, there should be a graph that says, your achievement gap, in math is what is it, 3%? And I don't know how you report if it's percent or some other standard score. For this year, there should be some sort of graph that tells you what your achievement gap is for next year, or that you're following, you're following cohorts of kids through and saying, this cohort is
Absolutely.
their achievement gap. So is that required in this report?
No, it's
or
not required,
Which is
but it
really
is best
odd.
practice. What
It
you're
is.
asking for is change over time.
Right.
So often when you do that, you have to pull out those kids, only those kids who have been in that school, those cohorts. If you do a 5-year comparison, you're looking for growth over time or change over time within that 5 years. And yes, that is something that we will be able to do with some new data tools that are being afforded to us.
So does DPI not require it? Because
No.
every district doesn't have the capacity to be able to pull those kinds of numbers.
We have no common data. So
It's still astounding to me that there's a process called achievement gap reduction, and we don't report on the gap reduction. It makes no sense. I mean, it sounds like that's a DPI thing, but it's still,
Yeah, I know we've looked at cohort shifting over time, and I can see Stephen and Gwen, and we've had these conversations, and we've looked at cohorts moving. That's really what is not evident in here. We're looking at it, so I don't know if we wanted to have them comment on it, because it looks like this is flat one year,
Right.
but I know, I've looked at it, so I know.
the data that you have in front of you is change over time within 1 school year. So
Right.
those kids who came to us who were here in this fall of 2016 and remained with us through in that grade level, remained with us in spring of 2017. So
our
yes.
progress monitoring reports from teaching and learning in math and ELA, we addressed that with the past cohorts, and we showed the different cohorts moving over time. But that is correct. And I also want to caution us that this is only one type of assessment. Having another assessment tool to measure to it will really get us to have a deeper look at exactly what Mr. Dorff is asking us. Is what I get, what is the reduction and how do we know we're reducing it? We're down to the student, each individual student and the progress they're making, and are they closing their, shall I say, their personal learning gap? So we are to that level now in the district in monitoring, and as we had mentioned, the practices that are mentioned in here in collecting your data it's a norm of the district. It's an expectation that we do use data to inform our instructional practices and decisions.
So if I could comment first and offer a response to Dr. Wagner's question with regards to bright spots. If you look at Table 2 in the data, the last 4 columns, you'll see students at benchmark in the fall and the spring. So, page 4?
6.
You sure it's 6?
Oh, mine
Yep.
may be a
4.
different one than 4.
Page 4.
Sorry, I'm on a different.
Yep, Table 2 on page 4.
There's a table 2 on page 6 too.
Ruh-roh.
I know I had a table too.
Okay, table 2 on page 4, please.
Oh, wait a minute.
Is it a chart?
We don't have any table on page 4.
It has to be,
Different.
Did they get a different?
well,
one?
I,
Level data, you're talking
yeah,
level
this-
data for English reading.
Yep,
yeah.
last 4 columns.
That is table 2, it's on our page 6.
Okay, sorry. So table 2, last 4 columns, students at benchmark in fall and in spring. So we did use the vendor marks from the publishers. Publishers were Heinemann for the Fontes Pinnell and Pearson for the EDL2. 543 were the number of students overall that were at benchmark, at the reading benchmark they needed to be at in the fall, and then at that benchmark again in the spring. So those are students that kind of held their position in line. Students at benchmark in the fall and not in spring, those are the students we're concerned about because they were meeting a benchmark, but then when they got assessed again in the spring, they had fallen out of meeting that benchmark. Again, that can happen for a variety of reasons, but there were 118 students that fell into that category overall. What I'm really excited about, the 3rd column, those are students that came to us in the fall. They were not at the benchmark, but by the spring, through the instructional practices, intervention, and coaching that's taking place at these schools, 388 of those students moved from not meeting the reading benchmark in the fall to actually meeting the benchmark in the spring. I think if you follow those columns 2 and columns 3, or well, those 2 columns that I just talked about down, you can see that we have a lot more kids moving from not being or not meeting the benchmark in the fall to meeting the benchmark in the spring. For me, that's a major bright spot district-wide, and a demonstration that something we're doing is working to help those kids move from not being at the level they needed to be at when they came to us in the fall to them being at the level they needed to be at in the spring. That being said, as has been talked about tonight, there are some limitations to this data set because we're talking about 1 year of kids. And we do have the capacity, and we've looked at some cohort models where we're following kids either with reading benchmarks or with STAR benchmarks, reading and math benchmarks where we have those available over multiple years, similar to what we do with DPI's state assessment data. So we have the capacity to bring some of that back to the board, and I think there are plans to do that throughout the course of this year already, and we intend to do that. For the DPI report, again, I think as you pointed out, Ed, that's a limitation of this report is they want a year's worth of data. They want to know what you did. And so a challenge, again, all of the schools that are selected for this are all students with a high minority student population. So how do you know if you're closing the gap when you're using curriculum benchmarks and you don't really have any other data set to draw from? That's the limitation of this data set. What we will have going forward is by using STAR assessment, which is norm referenced, we'll be able to see how those students compare to same grade peers throughout the course of a year, and if they're making progress in closing that gap compared to a normed U.S. sample.
Then one more question on the chart 7, which is on my page 10. I'm looking at the math assessment, and I'm just curious, there must be some sort of at least theory or explanation for the drop that seems to start 3rd quarter in 1st grade and then plummets in 2nd grade, and what's going on with that,
Nancy, would you
data,
like to?
those data?
That's specific to do with what's assessed for AVMR.
And I'm aware of that, but this data bank, not all of our schools were not even trained in administering AVMR at the time.
Okay.
So we addressed many of those questions in our presentation to the board, and I'm sorry, I keep referencing it, in June and July. One thing we do know, that in our curriculum that we are using in our pilot, you will see children drop before they take off. And that is because of the structure in which the learning and the rigor is set up. So they build the foundation, but then you will see the children will have a slight dip, and then they accelerate, because now they have the essential skills and strategies to really do a more complex math, which would be the rigor that's the demand of that next standard or next set of standards. And we will definitely address that next year. We'll probably even at our pilot check-ins, where we'll be able to go a little deeper with that. We'll make sure we do that so we can bring that out and make a closure of learning there.
So this is an implementation of AVMR phenomenon?
Assessment.
Okay, and I know we didn't have everybody trained all at once and things like that, but when the schools were trained, did they start out right away K-5, or did they start with
Yes.
different grade levels?
When the schools were trained, they began with the whole school implementing.
Okay.
As they take on course 2, then there are additional subtests that are given at the upper grades. They move beyond structuring to multiplication, place value, so on and so forth.
And we've been doing it for how many years?
3 years.
This is our third?
This would be our 4th year.
But
And
the
our-
first year, it wasn't, it was
First year,
very
we were
piloted.
just training and building
Right.
the program.
Right.
Then we had our priority schools and our focus schools lead out with it. And then the staff, then the principals had the 3 years to implement the training within their cycle of professional learning throughout the school year. And now this is our last year, and every school by the end of May will be trained in course 1 and course 2.
So could this be a phenomenon where foundational skills are easier to remediate when the kids are younger? And we've got kindergarten and first grade doing very well with AVMR, and then second grade less well, or?
The foundations weren't there.
Yeah.
So the children have been in school, and prior to us moving forward with a new curriculum, the rigor of our current adopted math curriculum does not align with the practices of AVMR.
Oh,
This AVMR and Bridges have a far greater structure, inquiry-based platform than just memory recall. And so when you're using an assessment like AVMR that requires strategic action and having command of that versus just memory recall, then you're not supporting children in their learning with the assessments and the instructional resources that complement each other. So our resources do not complement AVMR. That's why we have so many of our teachers asking for these Bridges resources, because they see the power of teaching this way. It's just they need the resources that match this new it's not really a new methodology in teaching. It's just a far more complex building. And a lot of it is we have to embrace additional rigor, or we have to have a rigorous curriculum that our teachers to teach from. We become, I'm going to be very careful how I say this, but we become comfortable with just making growth. I want to caution us that it's not just making growth and closing gaps, that we're focused on. It's meeting proficiency. And so the sky is even higher, but we have to support our staff and the resources, professional learning, and the assessments that align to that. And we're there. We are very, very close. We'll see it first in the pilot schools, and then the story will unfold.
So, and I assume we'll see the data from the pilot schools at the end of this year. And how many were there? 9?
There are 7 pilot
7,
schools.
okay.
And I think we're going to be bringing you updated data as soon as we have
Okay.
enough to bring you. Right now, they're just getting acclimated with the resource, and they are implementing it. And I would love to go with the board, any board member, to any of our pilot schools and observe one of those classrooms in action. It's pretty amazing, so.
Could we go to one of each,
Absolutely.
just to see the
The
difference
comparison
between
between the two?
the curriculum that our schools are using and this one, just to kind
I
of get a
think
flavor of
that'd
that?
be- I think that'd
I
be
think that would be
wonderful.
good.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if you could I'm just thinking if we could set that up so that, depending on whether we want to post it or not, or, but have more than one of us go at a time. I think that's just more efficient for people than taking one board member around at a time. That takes a lot of people's times.
We can certainly work to get that arranged
Yeah.
in both of the schools that Ann and Andre oversee.
Yeah, that would be great. Just, throw out some
Absolutely.
possibilities, and we'll try to cluster ourselves together.
Something I'd appreciate in the future, if you could, when you have reports like this, put it in the context of other evaluations we're doing and how they support each other to help our teachers help our kids.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that it, Julie?
Yes, I'm sorry, that was the, yeah. that
Okay.
was-
All right. Thanks, Julie. Next, we'll move to our superintendent's update.
Very good, thank you. I'd like to begin with the calendar, and I'm looking through. I'm not sure where it went. Here it is. We have some important upcoming budget meetings, so I'm gonna share those out, and they will be posted on the website so that everyone who, you don't have to record these, you can just go to our website and make sure that you know exactly when they are as well, but we'll get those out there to the public in a number of ways. On October 2nd is our Teaching and Learning Work Session meeting here at 5:30. Immediately following is our Organizational Support Work Session meeting right here in room 331, and that's October 2nd. On October 16th, we have a special board meeting at 3 o'clock in room 138A. And then we'll have our regular board meeting at 5:30 and in this very room, and we'll have the deliberation and approval of the 2017-18 budget. So that again is both sessions, just back to back, combining the regular board meeting with the deliberation and approval of the budget. Yep.
I'm wondering, originally, when we were talking about this, I know we thought we would have it at 6:30, but I'm wondering, are we still planning 6:30?
No, because it'll be built in with the regular agenda.
Right, so I'm just wondering if you
Probably
want to,
Approximately 6:30, but
I just wonder if you want to get rid of that 6:30 on the
Yeah.
calendar, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the opportunity to present the budget. And so the board asks questions, but it's not the public engagement yet. On October 18th, we have our Intercity Student Council meeting with the board at 7 o'clock in the morning here in this room. October 18th, that same day, later in that day, is our public engagement session regarding the 2017-18 budget at 5:30. So October 18th is the opportunity for public to provide input in the budget, and I would assume as soon as the board provides a deliberation and approval, that will be posted as well so that people can go on the website. Lori, would that be accurate? So that they'll be able to see the budget and then provide that feedback. And then October 22nd is fall recess. Schools will be closed. And then on November 1st, once again, public hearing and special board meeting to adopt the 2017-18 district budget. So, and that's at 5:30. So providing a couple of opportunities, inviting the public to engage and provide input on the 2017-18 budget. And again, they'll be posted on the website. So that concludes the calendar, and I know that the next item, I think, Brenda, you're going to take, and then Melissa can provide any other input that you would like in that item as well.
Yes. All right, we talked, we have a board vacancy coming up, as you all know. I've asked Melissa to come forward just to talk through the statutory requirements for that and walk us through that process. And then there are a few decision points for us that we'll come to as part of this. So are you referencing the interview procedures or the other handout? We have, oh, no, the notice is, we'll look at that too.
Sure. So last week, I just want to thank Sandy and Lori as well. We sat down when we got word from Julie, and thank you, Julie, for your service, and we wish you well, and you'll be sorely missed on the board, so thank you. When Julie sent in her notice that she was going to need to resign from the board, we looked into the statutory requirements and what we needed to do, because I believe the last appointment to the board would have been Mrs. Maloney.
Yes.
So that preceded myself, and Sandy couldn't recall either, and it also preceded Lori. So we looked into what the statutory requirements were and what we needed to do. We will need to get a notice out to the electors soliciting their interest in serving on the board. The timing of of Julie's last meeting and when she will, her resignation will be effective, then determines how long that person serves an appointment and when the election will be held. So because Julie's resignation is effective prior to the last Tuesday in November, the appointment will only go through the election of April, and the individual, whoever you appoint, if they wish to serve beyond the election in April, will also need to run then for re-election. So there will be 3 seats open on the board. The top 2 vote getters will serve the 3-year term, and the third vote getter will serve what effectively will be a 1-year term by that point. And that was clarified with the state, clarified that for us through the city clerk's office. So we have a policy that we updated last year with respect to when appointments need to be made, and they have to be made within 60 days. And the policy also talks through other procedural requirements, but there are some holes left in that policy, so that's what we're bringing forward tonight, is the proposed procedure, where we would post the vacancy, how we would get word out, and then how that appointment would happen here in front of the board, and then the questions you would ask a candidate. We looked through the, WASB has a lot of resources on this, so we looked through various different resources to kind of narrow down questions that may be appropriate to ask a candidate, and Sandy sent those around. And then just some questions on how those interviews would be held by the board that we need your help determining. So do you want to walk through the questions, Brenda?
Well, I'm looking at the procedures thing, and the posting of the vacancy, are we waiting until the 2nd, or do we have to wait till the 2nd?
We do not have to wait till
Okay.
the 2nd. That's just what we had proposed following this meeting, but we can post it whenever you would like.
I mean, I'm just thinking to move along the process, because that's, I would post it right away.
Because people need to think about whether or not they want to pursue it.
And when would you like it to close?
How many weeks do you think is an appropriate amount of time to leave the application window open?
There's no real legal requirement, so I would leave that to the board's discretion.
I mean, we could keep it till the 16th if everyone thinks that's.
So that's about a month. And
Yeah.
if we have it posted by the end of the week, Lori, how soon can you get the notice posted?
Well, I guess I'd like 2 days, given that there was short staff.
Yeah. So if we could have it by Friday?
Yeah, and then that'll be not quite 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Because that's
Okay.
the 20, right? Almost 4 weeks.
We're gonna have it extend even just one day past the official resignation, and it just seems maybe cleaner to me that if for whatever reason someone found out that the resignation just happened, that they could still, not that it's, I think most people will have heard about it who might be interested, but there's just something about having to apply before the resignation actually took place, or is
Well,
it?
Julie has submitted her resignation. It's her effective date is the 17th.
I see.
So the public notice is tonight. It was in the board meeting minutes.
Okay, I'll withdraw that question.
Okay, so then I'm hearing the vacancy be posted when Lori can get it posted,
By
hopefully by Friday, and then leave it open through the 16th. Okay? Any other changes to that timeline? Did anyone have any changes to the posting itself? It was modeled again after WSB and what other school districts have done for the posting.
Whether there's a proper place for it, but a couple things. On the sheet you just passed around on number 6, last sentence, last line, would be effect on, I think effective is the word you want there. That's a minor point. Second, if we don't find someone that we're comfortable with in appointing, does the board have to appoint somebody?
The board is statutorily required to appoint somebody no later than 60 days from the effective date of the resignation.
So if for some reason there's somebody, or no one steps forward that we're at all comfortable with, we still have to?
Correct.
Okay.
But it's, sorry, 60 days from her.
From the effective date of Julie's resignation.
So if we get this process going, we'd have some leeway to be able to, to open it up again and try to get candidates, yeah. I mean, it sounds like we'll have we'd have plenty of time.
Interviewing on only day 7 of 60.
days,
The goal was to give you a timeline so that there would be somebody here for November, for your November meeting was the goal.
But if we can't, but if we don't, we don't have to have someone at our November meeting. We can
Correct.
take that full
Yep,
60
correct.
days, right? Okay.
Melissa,
Good.
just for clarification, if someone is appointed and they want to run in April, they can be appointed and they can also run, they would have to declare in November?
Correct.
Okay, that's,
Right,
okay.
correct,
Just-
correct. All candidates have to declare by that date.
Okay.
In November?
I'm
I
sorry,
thought it was
December.
December, I'm
December.
sorry, December is when they would
I'm
have,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, they have to make that decision very quickly.
Yep.
Okay.
With the vacancy notice, this is a little thing, I don't know if it's required or not. With number 6, letter of interest limited to approximately 700 words. I wouldn't want that to scare somebody off. I mean, thinking, oh, I've got to write 700 words, and
Yeah, we went round and round with that. Sandy and I met with Brendan, Dr. Langenfeld too, just to get a draft so you could at least look at something tonight. We didn't want it to be, you have to review pages and pages and pages, and we didn't want people to think they were limited to 700 words either, so we drafted it that way, approximately 700 words, which is about 2 pages. So,
Can we give our,
my concern would be that people are going to write too much. It's
Okay.
that's going to scare people off and say, because you look at that and, you're scanning, oh, I've got to write 700 words. And I realize it says limited to approximately,
Yeah.
but do
do
we
you have a
have to put a number
suggestion?
in there?
You don't want a number in there? That's fine.
Would it make more sense to say X number of pages instead of a number of words?
Not to exceed.
Is it
It might.
that big of a concern that, I don't know, if we have, when we have 7 to 10 applicants last time, I don't know if in the unlikely event each person sent 5 or 6 pages, I think it's unlikely. People might send resumes.
But your
and be
concern
wondering,
is that the 700 is gonna seem like too much.
Too much.
That it's
for
going to
people.
limit interest because I'm going to see that number 700 and think, oh, I've got to write 700 words. And,
Right.
whereas
right.
2 pages sounds better than 700 words, I
You say
think.
limited to 2 pages,
Yeah.
Do we need do we really need a limit?
I don't think so.
That's up to you.
I-
If you
Just
told me
say
2 pages,
letter-
I'd have 8
I
point
just say
font,
letter of
single
interest, yeah.
space.
Letter of interest and-
Well, they better send that one electronically, because we'll have to up the font. Should we just say 2 pages? The letter, and instead of saying limited, for those that might want to write more, the letter of interest is expected to be approximately 2 pages.
Can be
Can
approximately.
be.
Say the letter of interest should
Right.
should minimally address.
And let
say the things
people
that you
go?
wanna see
Just
in there.
combine,
All right.
yeah, just
Okay.
combine 5 and 6 and just say minimally address why the individual wants to serve on the board.
5 and 6. Oh, I
Yeah.
see. And should minimally, yeah.
And to
Cross
minimally
out this
address
whole
why the
section.
individual wants to serve on the board, the qualities the individual will bring to the board, just that, rather than the,
And then just take out the letter of interest is limited to approximately
Right.
700 words. Stop, okay.
That's fine. Any other suggestions? That was the one we debated the most. Okay, and then any questions on the timeline? What we would
Well, I
like
think-
is to be able to have Sandy print the packets for you to be able to review them, and then the board would get together to screen those applicants. You're not required to bring every individual in for an interview, so at the time that you screen the applications, you would determine who you'd like to bring in for an interview.
Do we want to put in here somewhere a phone contact? Just to, if somebody wants to ask a couple of questions about, rather than making the initial contact by letter, just, if they want to ask what the process is.
It's on there.
Is
Sandy's
there
number's
where?
on there. Second page. Inquiries regarding, just before the bottom, second to last paragraph.
Oh, okay.
I don't see it now, but before I thought I saw that the applicant only had to indicate his or her phone number. Would you not want the email also? Request their email? No, and/or their phone number for text messaging? I'm just throwing that part out there.
Okay?
Or we could do what we've done with our public forum and, and have them provide their preferred method of contact.
Well, they do for sure have to provide their address.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm saying, and then, contact, telephone, email, because some people aren't comfortable even giving you your email or their cell phone for that matter.
The notice does say your contact information by virtue of applying is subject to open records, and that's statutory, so we cannot redact that. So we did put that notice in there so that people understand by applying that information is subject to.
But they're not required to supply a phone number and an email.
I believe, I don't have the final in front of me, Sandy.
They're required to do their name and residential address, for sure. And then we added telephone number, and now I'll add email. Would you prefer?
Just write, address and then put preferred contact, telephone and email, to give them the option of giving us one or the other, so they don't feel like they have to give a phone number if they don't want to.
I prefer adding email, and I'll tell you why, because let's say you're in a position you have to call. Well, if they don't answer the phone directly, do you necessarily want to leave a message on their I forgot the name of it.
Voicemail?
Thank you. Voicemail. To know they got it. I don't know. I mean, it's a minor point.
All right, and then if you have feedback about these interview questions, let Sandy know by the end of the month. And then we need to determine the date we're screening applicants and interview and selection dates. I know Katie's gone until the 23rd, you're back, or
I'm back-
24th?
I'm back late on the 23rd.
Okay. So we could, and you're leaving the 18th?
Yes.
So we can't do it we can't do it before you leave. So we could screen the week of, starting as soon as the 23rd in the evening. Right? When are you back?
Late on the 23rd.
So not for a
Right.
meeting?
Right.
Okay, so we'd have to do it 24th, 25th. Oh, and then I'm out of town.
I've got 24th and 25th open.
So do I. Anybody have conflicts for either of those?
I'm out of town on the 25th.
Okay, we've narrowed it to the 24th.
24th?
Yeah, 24th is fine, I think.
Chris?
I'm okay at 24th.
All right. What time?
I'm wide open.
Andrew?
This is when we would be.
Screening.
Screening.
It's just screening, so it's Maybe we could
Screening
start
applications.
later, there's, I mean, I don't know,
It'd have to be later for me, I've got.
Oh, what time?
It'd have to be after 4 o'clock.
oh, okay, yeah,
I
usually,
should do 4:30.
okay.
Yeah, I'm good anytime there.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And this will be a public session noticed as an open meeting.
So October 24th at 4:30. And then interviewing, I'm out of town, I think, I'm not sure, I'm coming back on Monday, but I think I'm coming back later. But that week, I mean, we could do it on the 1st, we have public hearing adoption of the budget, which won't take a lot of time. We could piggyback that, could we, Sandy, with posting and everything?
Correct.
Okay. Does that work for people, just to stay, right now, the public hearing adoption of budget is scheduled at 5:30. We could just schedule this immediately, except is that fair to candidates waiting to interview?
They may want to be here for the public meeting for the budget.
Yeah,
We're usually done with that meeting in 15 minutes.
yeah, I know, but it's public hearing, so if we have people talking to us,
Yeah, but usually they usually
You-
come to the engagement, usually have 1 or 2 people
oh,
come.
the public hearing,
You could
okay.
post it to start at 6. You can always start later. You can't start earlier. And if that
Okay.
goes later, then the interviews would just be backed up.
Right. All right. Does that work? Everybody okay with that?
6 o'clock.
So, yeah, 5:30 is the adoption of the budget, and then this one will just be immediately
Sorry.
following that board meeting.
November 1st.
Is it?
November 1st.
Thank you.
And then, all right, got that. And then, the questions to be answered, we can talk about who will ask the interview questions when we do our screening. There's no reason to.
Those are just questions we need you to think about. We can talk about
Right.
it during the screening.
Yeah, so we'll decide that during the screening, how we want to do that. And then, I'm wondering if we can answer all those questions at the screening? How much time do we have between, we've got
A
a
week.
week?
I think the most important thing will be how long you want the interviews to be, because that's going to then set up the schedule for us for on the 1st. So once you determine how many applicants you're interviewing, then determining the length of the interview,
Yeah,
because then when Sandy calls in for the interviews, we'll need that.
I'm wondering if those questions are better to answer, I mean, we can give vague, approximate kind of information to candidates, but that, I mean, some of those will depend on how many candidates we want to interview,
Correct.
as to how quickly we, if we leave break times, if, all that kind of stuff in there.
So you could make all those decisions on October 24th.
Yes.
Just think about
But
them
it'll be
some-
way easier, because this is then
Yep.
all, well, if we have this, then we'll
Yep.
do it this way, and that way we can just make the decision about how to run the interviews when we know how many candidates we're gonna interview.
Is there a legal requirement that everyone be asked only questions off the list, or all ask the same questions?
No,
Okay.
no.
I mean, I think it's a good starting point, but there could be any number of
Follow-up or,
individual
yeah,
things about a person's particular background or areas of strength that you might want to ask.
yeah, I usually think it's once we set those questions, that we ask everybody the same questions, and then have follow-up
Plus-
unique to
plus follow-up,
each
okay.
person, yeah.
I think is that everything, Sandy? Is that what we
Is that
needed?
all we needed to
so.
accomplish tonight? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa and Sandy. And Dr. Langenfeld, who all had a role in all of this. All right, I'll turn it back to you.
Sure, thanks.
The last time at the last meeting, we talked about the District Boundary Committee or Task Force, and on Neptune posted is an updated copy of the governance question and guiding change document with the additions that were provided and suggestions during our conversation. One of them actually, and I believe Dr. Wagner brought that forward in terms of acceptable means in the best interest of students, but also families. So we've added families to two different, the acceptable means and the results. And then Board Member Dorff spoke about the feeder patterns to bring greater clarity. So hopefully this is clear. Current feeder patterns in terms of our current reality is our current feeder patterns for elementary to secondary schools do not always align. So that was a little clear, and I think those were the only two recommendations in terms of change. This particular document is intended to provide members of the task force a clear pathway to what currently is, and then obviously deeper examination, and then what kinds of solutions they should be looking for. So that's the guiding change document, and if folks are good with that, I'm not sure you need a vote. We can just take draft off. Is that I don't think we need a vote, but I don't know. They need to vote? Okay. The next documents I'm going to share with you, Lori and I worked on, primarily Lori, but I want to share those with you. We talked about dates, and we talked about letters that would be sent out to folks as well. So I'm going to share those with you. And I believe we should have copies if anyone out there is following along. And we can post these, Lily ran copies? Okay, so that if people can see them who are here in the audience. And then obviously they'll be posted as well as part of our minutes and part tomorrow. One of the things that we wanted to have very clear for the task force as folks apply, and this is an application process, is to really understand that at this point in time, the role of the task force is really intended to really gather that information. There's a lot of information to look at and analyze and review in terms of enrollment projections and so forth, facility capacity. So some of it will be going back and looking at the work of the facilities task force, then looking forward and bringing in experts to talk about the growth. We had some conversations, obviously, during the facilities task force, but really bringing in the community experts to talk about that, folks from the city, possibly the county, and then really looking at also where people are living, in terms of community and so forth, and being able to do some adjustments as to different scenarios, and then bringing forward with a lot of discussion recommendations for future study. So if, for example, they see large growth on the east side, which they may, then you could see in terms of potential, then they could provide that be one scenario, and then looking at the whole district, then what does that mean and so forth. So the goal is to bring forward multiple recommendations that will require even future study. Then the family community representation, the goal is to make sure that we have parents and guardians and also community members who represent our students and the diversity of our community on this task force. And task force members, again, the recommendation is they be open-minded and really focused on student learning and have a willingness to engage in a lot of inquiry and meaningful dialogue throughout the process. As noted the last time, district staff will be a resource, and board members certainly are welcome to, like we did with the facilities, be part of the observation, during any and all of these. And then the task force members are expected to attend scheduled meetings. We provided a number of dates, providing a monthly board or monthly meeting dates that we'll put out in letters, but also post as well. Making sure that we had dates that we could possibly provide further information and updates once a month to the board. So bringing forward any information or asking any questions. I think that was an excellent suggestion that someone brought up at the last meeting, is that if there are questions that the task force is having, we can provide them and posit them to the board during my report in the second board meeting each month. And then task force members are expected to review documents and bring forward that information. There's a whole way to apply and some simple questions that people will be asked if they're interested in serving and why they're interested, and then bringing forward what perspectives they would bring. So we'll put an end date during the application process. We can do this email, but that you can also have print copies available. Then we'll also be sending letters to our facilities and secondary task force members, and there's a copy of the proposed letter in this document as well, letting people know, thanking them for their past service and bringing or reaching out to them because of their past service and asking if they have interest, and then providing the dates so that people can check calendars and so forth. So again, how to apply will be in this document and posted online as well, so that people can weigh in and have their voice heard. The other piece we did talk about in this process would be affording community the opportunity to weigh in at the end of each of these meetings as well. So that'll be all part of the process we would post for moving forward. So
Lori asked a question about providing community input. In the next phase, is it sometime in the middle of these meetings? Or is it after these meetings are over?
It's
But they actually had something to show people, and so I guess as I reflected on it more, I'm wondering if it's appropriate at this point, or if it'd be more appropriate if we get to a second phase of the boundary task force, where suddenly we're looking at potential boundary changes, and at that time it makes more sense when people actually have something to look at. I mean, I don't think it hurts to have it, if people wanted to come and they came and listened and they had questions, it'd give an opportunity for them to engage with the task force themselves. I just thought I'd pose the question.
With the application information, are we going to entertain having folks on the task force who don't live within the boundaries of the Green Bay Area Public School District? I would think that would be an expectation, right? I mean, we're asking the questions, do you live in the...
That's an interesting conversation. We actually had that conversation today, because that was my first reaction. And what other districts have done sometimes is bring in folks who have greater knowledge of different, they may be, for example, someone who runs a community organization in our community, for example. They may be a CEO who has broad interest for the children and families in Brown County, for example, but they may not be a Green Bay resident. So that we leave up to the board, but that's why that was put on there, and certainly a point for discussion, and the board would have to make that decision. Does that? Yeah, that's why it's there.
One part of the application that goes into our decision-making, yeah.
Right, and it would be certainly up to the board to determine if that would be a value add to the team.
And then in terms of the open forum, I'm inclined to just have it, like Lori said, even from the beginning. That gives people a chance to ask questions, clarifying, and, and then maybe providing, if their experience is different than what everyone on the task force is talking about, they can say, I just want to point out that, here's whatever, that's, I think that would be, I'm okay with that. Is everyone else fine with having it from the beginning? Okay, so we'll do that.
Would student reps fill this out, or would we just get student, or would we just ask ICSC for student reps? Would it be necessary for the student representatives to fill out the form too? I figure either way, we would start by asking interested student council, but should we just so it's in their records?
I would open it up. You might get students that are really interested that this is the only way they found out about it, and they sent an application in.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say it would necessarily be limited, but I think the general procedures we would start with ICSC. Okay, so either way, students too would fill this out. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think any
Yeah, I would
potential
think so.
member would fill out the application.
So it would be. Right, it wouldn't be limited to current students either, I wouldn't think. It'd be college, community, so.
Yeah, although I think, well, I mean, we can make this decision too, but
That
I would
you-
think it'd be helpful to have a current student
Sure, but.
as one of them, but yeah,
Absolutely.
anybody that's
Mhm.
been in our school certainly could be viable candidates.
Sure. So if we're good with moving this forward, we'll clean it up a bit and share it out. And then I have one more thing here. If I can find it. There's a lot of, just a success story. There's many success stories that I'm hearing because I'm out and about and saying to folks, tell me something good. But this particular email came from one of our new assistant principals at West High School, and obviously he was bragging about West High School staff. And this actually came from a parent in a community during a volleyball game. An elderly gentleman on August 29th collapsed and it was tended to by the West staff. And the note came from the gentleman's daughter with a special thank you to the staff. And he wrote, or it was written, I'm writing to ask you to thank your volleyball team, staff, and fans for their awesome help when my dad passed out in front of the bench August 29th. We were there to watch my niece from Southwest. The staff at West was very responsive in helping my dad when he collapsed. The AED knowledge, the help from the stands to help me ease him to the floor. Some staff held towels for privacy, called 911, and encouraged him and our volleyball and family, or the volleyball bench coaches, took care of him. We are very grateful and want to thank them and report Dad is doing well. So it's a very positive story, and we're getting a lot of those. I think this it speaks volumes to the staff and also the training that's important as well with those AEDs ready to go at the ready. So the other piece is a great story in the paper today about East High School students and some of the great work that they're doing around food sourcing. So that concludes my report.
All right, we'll move next to our Intercity Student Council report. I'll turn that over to Grace.
All right, so hi, I'm Grace, and this will be our first report of the school year, so we have a lot of great things to report on all of our schools. So first off, we're going to start with John Dewey. So actually tonight, John Dewey is having a Ford fundraiser, which is for every person who goes in and test drives a new Ford. It gives John Dewey $20, which then they put towards field trips and attending things so that the school can, it's a real moneymaker for the schools. They're able to do things like that. And also this summer they had student ambassador training, which is for students to show around new prospective students and to explain to members of the community more in-depthly what John Dewey is, what they're all about, so that people get more acquainted with the school and know more about it. And so they just had a bunch of students trained to do that and trained to give tours of the school as well.
Hi, I'm Japrisha. I'll be reporting on West. West has a new principal, Miss Jacobson. They have a new stage floor. They just had a band camp. Their newspaper is starting up now. And summer student run blood drive collected 8 pints of blood. 18 pints of blood. And they haven't, their academic decathlon is recruiting members, and they have a powder game on the 20th. And I'll also be doing for Southwest. Homecoming is Saturday, September 23rd from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. The musical has started. We will have 2 musicals this year. The first one is, I don't really know the title of it, but I know that the Mr. Rockstro is the, he created it himself, he made it his own self. And the second one is Les Morales, so that's that one. Link Crew started. Key Club just had a meeting on last Wednesday. DECA just started. They had a meeting Monday. Sting Cancer starts Thursday. Also Art Club and FBA starts Thursday. We have a new athletic director, Mrs. Hogan from Lombardi. There's a Green Bay United Swimming versus Pulaski on Tuesday, so which is tomorrow. We have a homecoming parade on Wednesday at 6, and that's followed by a powder puff game at 7. Girls varsity volleyball is at Preble Thursday, and so is tennis. And boys varsity soccer versus the Connors on Thursday. And our football team is 5-0, and we have a game Friday at 7 against Sheboygan South.
So now for Preble, our homecoming is a little bit later this year. It's on October 8th. And we just finished casting for Hairspray, which is our school's musical this year. And so now they're starting practices and all the sets and everything like that, which is super exciting. Football is 4-1. They have a game at Sheboygan North on Friday. Our boys soccer has won all of their tournaments that they've gone to, and they're doing very well in their season, just like they were doing last year, so we're hoping for the best. Our link crew had their first meeting, and National Honor Society is having their first meeting tomorrow morning. We had a blood drive today. I'm not exactly sure how many pints we got, but we normally do pretty well, so that's really exciting. Our boys cross country, JV, and varsity both took home the city championship, which is really awesome, so great for them. And we are currently having student council elections right now. And our drum line, just the other day, they went through 2 different neighborhoods, and they were playing on the drums and everything while other students went up to doors and asked for canned foods. And so it was for the Stock the Box event. And so that was just a really fun way to get the community involved and the music involved. And lastly, we have East. So as most everyone knows, they got their new football turf, and their musical is starting as well. It's called A Chorus Line this year. All students at East are receiving Chromebooks this year, so everyone gets their own computer, as well as all of the students who travel to East for a class. They get computers as well, which is really cool. Their show choir is practicing and starting to practice for competitions and everything like that coming up. Their student council is getting ready for homecoming, as it is September 30th, so it's coming up pretty quick. And they had a band camp this summer and are now playing. And DECA and FBLA both started up. That's all we have. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Grace. And next we'll go, as soon as I get my glasses on. Next is our legislative liaison report, and I'll turn that over to Julie.
On the attachment that is on the computer, just want to get to it. The first attachment is a journal article, and that is in the highs and lows of the state budget, and so that you can go right along and look and see what has happened. It was sent to, as of Friday, it was sent to the governor, and I'm just going to give you some of the items that are going to the governor at this time. There's increases per pupil categorical aid by $200 in 2017 and 18, and an additional $204 in 2018-2019. Districts will receive $654 per pupil in 2018 and 2019. These are the increases the governor proposed and are in line with the WASB's legislative agenda. It also, this budget for the education will raise a lower revenue ceiling from the current $9,100 to $9,300 in 2017 and 18, and to $9,400 per pupil in 2018-19, $9,500 per pupil in 19 and 20, $9,600 per pupil in 2021, and it goes $1,000 up each, not $1,000, $100 each year, up until 22-23, and each year thereafter. The governor proposed no increase in the low revenue ceiling, and is seeking an increase in the low revenue ceiling was an item in the WASB's legislative agenda. The As passed by the legislature, they preserve the revenue limit adjustment for energy efficiency measures in the statutes, which the governor had proposed to eliminate. So instead provides for a one-year moratorium in calendar 2018 on new energy efficiency projects that are exempt from revenue limits by prohibiting districts from adopting a resolution to utilize the adjustment between January 1st, 2018 and December 31st, 2018. And just a side note from the WASB, 3 of 4 conservative GOP senators who had held out on supporting the budget changed their minds after securing promises from Governor Walker. So that is moving forward. Limits when school district referenda to exceed revenue limits or issue bonds can be held to only on regularly scheduled election days, spring primary or election or partisan primary or general election, or on the second Tuesday of November in odd numbered years. So that also is in there. It also allows schools to notify parents or guardians of their child's truancy by electronic communication, increases the family income eligibility limits for entry into the statewide voucher program from 185% of the federal poverty level to 220% of the federal poverty level. Michelle, do you want to speak on that point at all?
It doesn't take effect, I don't think, until next year.
2018, 2019.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, and I think that the piece that I would offer is if it follows suit as to what happened with the first round of vouchers, it most likely will have to be monitoring, but many times it's the students who are already in the private school setting that will take advantage of that. Well, that remains to be seen, but that certainly could happen, that there will be more eligible that will apply.
Okay. Anyhow, the attachment is on one of the other items that is. Go ahead,
I have a question on the budget. You're done with the budget?
Yes, I just want to mention that they do have the amendment to the law about the teachers. I'm looking for it now. The teaching school that they want to, and I'm trying to find it now, lifetime licenses for teachers and principals, and I'm looking for the, I know I lost it. Well, I lost it, I'll have to find it, I'm sorry. I was going through my list. The other thing that's a plus is that the budget calls for giving schools, private as well as public, $125 for each ninth grader in the 2018-2019 school year for such devices. And that really helps our school district also, even though that we have that going on. And I cannot find the list. If you want to ask Brenda what you want.
Well, and now I'll have 2 questions, but back, I didn't follow the low revenue ceiling. Did they raise?
Yeah.
But then she said something after that, it sounded like they didn't raise it, so I was confused. So they're raising it from, right now it's 9,100?
It's currently 91
something.
9,100 to 9,300 in 2017-2018.
So that's this year.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And
then the next year?
Then up $100 from the beginning each year.
Okay.
That follows through each year after.
Until it hits 9,800 in 2022. But the key with this is that, and there was discussion both ways, the district's per pupil revenue authority below this amount could increase it's the taxable.
Right.
So moving forward into to raise the local levy. That's the difference. The original bill that came out of the assembly that was being moved actually, or tried to be moved or discussed, was it would not have come out of the local levy, it would have come out of state funding. So, but at that point in time, with that caveat, was also a reduction in the 200 to 150 per pupil. So it was shifting money to raise that low revenue ceiling without raising taxes, and I think, or low, raising the levy. And I think that was the piece that the governor was not supporting in terms of the low revenue ceiling because of the property tax piece. It's, I think one of the cautions with this whole budget, if the WASB just came out and they have a letter that is going to Governor Walker. I mean, this has happened within the last several hours. I think this just came, I just saw it pop. But really, certainly thanking the governor for support for the proposed public school budget, but also getting into some various areas in terms of requesting vetoes. Energy efficiency, the revenue limit adjustment, basically, the program, they indicated, should be preserved for energy efficient projects that could save the money. So it's my understanding that you can use the energy efficiencies just as long as you don't raise that revenue limit on that. So looking at that, they have a whole list that goes through of all these different pieces that went through, indicating some were not policy and so forth, so.
But we're already above 9,100, aren't we?
We're above 9,100, we're at 94 something, John? Is
So
that
that,
accurate?
that doesn't hit us until it becomes 94 to 9,500? Okay, so we got a few years before we would look at that.
It's actually a very good step in the right direction. We've been trying to get equity for years, but recognizing that it does have impact in communities that will be potentially using this opportunity for raising that levy limit.
Okay,
And then this prep, the article about the teacher prep program, were you going to talk about that?
That was, I'm looking for my notes.
Okay.
I
They're
can I-
allowing this school to, I read the article and I can't remember,
Yes, I'm looking.
allowing the school to get licenses to teach in Wisconsin?
It
Yeah,
was American.
American something.
American Board for Certification.
American Board for
It's just that they-
Certification.
That's what I'm trying to get at,
Technically,
yeah.
it's likely to be them, it's, technically, they can't state it as them. In this article, it just says.
Right, the one that's a 10, I can't
okay.
get
The
back
budget
to
doesn't
it.
explicitly name a particular provider. State law prohibits that.
Now, did they get lifetime licenses too, or is there some?
Okay, I'm just getting it
I
over.
think the real caution with that particular piece in that alternate teacher prep program is really the accountability for the quality of the educational institution. And, you know, our teachers who are in front of our children are the most important in terms of their learning. So to be able to ensure that they've taken a pathway to be able to not only teach content, but also children or students, two different things, is to make, you know, is something that obviously you don't have to hire these people. And the district would have to be very cautious, but the WASB is opposing that. Every organization in terms of educators has great concern, and making sure that support for teacher licensure program that has a rigor and some sort of competency exams would be something that we would continue to support as well, I would think. Making sure we have the very best in front of our kids. And I don't know, Julie, if you found.
No,
you're able
that's
to find
basically
it.
what we had it attached, and I thought I had it printed, so I apologize for searching for that, but that's why it's attached, so you, and like you said, Michelle, Tony Evers also said it's a backdoor way to lowering standards for an online licensing factory, is a quote from him, on one who refuses to meet the minimum standards set by the legislature and department. So it's, and they don't know quite why it wasn't placed into the budget.
And they don't know who sponsored it. They're
Right,
not
there's no
identifying
names on
who
the
sponsored
sponsor.
it.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Yeah,
They're not
there's,
identifying who sponsored it.
there's no names attached.
But it's in the budget that's sitting on the governor's desk right
Right.
now.
So it's a,
Alberta
How does it
Darling
happen
and John
there's no name
Nygren
attached to the sponsor
did not
paper?
respond to requests for comment. They, apparently, they just put it in with no names.
Suspicious.
and even as of today, as I was trying to make sure I was updated, and it was very hard to find on the internet any additions, any more information on this, and I was just having a heck of a time this morning. Yeah, and this was there.
We're skeptical, I'd say follow the money.
Well,
Skeptical.
so we'll have to see where this goes, but thank you for,
All right, next is our, first time we've had this on our agenda is board member school visits update. And I don't know if anyone wants to report out on any visits that they've done since, over the last month, since our last meeting.
I'm on as far in, so I can start, maybe we can go that way. Yeah, yes, I had the opportunity to visit all the schools and chat with the principals. It's truly a wonderful time of the year. Everybody's pumped to be back. Kids are squeaky clean. Staff's excited and rested after the summer. And I personally thoroughly enjoyed being out, and also had a chance to interact with some parents during a couple open houses at schools. So anyway, I'm glad as a board we're making this commitment to go out there. I think, at least for myself, one finds it invigorating and refreshing to be out among the practitioners rather than just only sitting here, shall we say.
Anybody else? Ed?
I did get to all the schools before the teachers and students came back, and found the principals and staff that I did meet in the schools very, very receptive to the idea that board members would be coming by a little bit more often. Grace already mentioned some things at East, particularly the Chromebooks. I thought that was really impressive when I saw how that was working and what that means in terms of, if nothing else, not burdening the kids carrying around 40 pounds of books. They're also, they've, in addition to the football field having a renovation, the auditorium has a renovation as well. They are doing something with trying to restore a pit area and putting in some seats that had been taken out years ago and in storage. So interesting things there. I was really impressed with, I made a couple of visits out to Keller, some things that Dan and his staff are doing with lunch times. We're talking an elementary school, and the challenges there aren't quite the same as with a high school or a middle school, but still they have challenges with lunchtime, particularly utilizing a phy-ed area, what have you. But he's done some things with scheduling and seating arrangements that I think are really unique, and I won't go into all the detail on that, but I'll be interested to see how that's working out as the year wears on. And the other thing, just with Head Start, I think most everybody here has been to their new building. I was there the first day that they had kids in. I know some of you were as well, and boy, they're just excited as they can be with their new building, and it looks fantastic.
Go ahead.
I had the opportunity to stop at Tank the Wednesday before Labor Day, the Meet the Teacher evening, and it was every single, I asked all the teachers, are you comfortable if we just stop in? And there was, every single one of them said, no, just stop in, we want you to be here. I couldn't believe how welcoming and how excited they were that we are going to be doing this. So it's obviously something that they really want to see us in the schools. It was an excellent evening. I got to talk to Sean, the counselor at that school also. And then there was the Rotary Club was making dinner for the children that night. And they had just, when I talked to members of the Rotary Club, they couldn't say enough about the students and the politeness at Tank and what when they work with Tank, how excellent the students are to work with at Tank. So it was a really great evening. And I have to say this, that was one of my first ones I did before I had to make the decision to put my resignation in. It happened like I was there at that school and so pumped to get to the other schools. And then that 2 days after, things started rolling personally for me. So I'm really sorry I won't be able to finish that out, but it certainly was, what an excellent idea. So I wish you all luck this year on that, because I think it's going to be a great, great year with that. So.
And I visited all my schools. One of the things that, and I still don't have them all, but one of the ideas in talking to the principals about how to coordinate getting to things at the school and things like that was the principals shared their Google Calendar with me. So I can go on my Google Calendar and click a school, and then the things that are going on at that school show up on top of my Google Calendar, which is kind of nice, because I just was looking this week, and a CLT literacy and math meetings going on after school at one of my schools that I can at this point just slip in and attend that without having to check and things like that. So that's something, just an idea for people, just to have the principals share those calendars, because then those are, the meetings for teachers. It's also family nights and all of the different things that would be going on. And then I enjoyed Frable. I don't know if any of you have been out there though, but the windows and the remodeling with the work that they did last summer, the windows are just great, and they're very excited about that. And then I sat in on Edison's. They presented their PBIS report and the MLSS, and then a new plan that they have for streamlining the process for getting kids back to class. And I thought that was really interesting. They have some really a new approach for that, so I'll be interested to see how well that's received, how well it's working. And I also got to serve popcorn with Katie at Howe for their for their back to school night. Katie and Mark and Debbie Ward had dinner, and I was just a helper. So
You did well. It's quite a popcorn bagging crew up there.
well, yeah, that's true. We had Dr. Langenfeld and Vicki and John Magus, everybody bagging popcorn.
Did you make sure everybody washed their hands?
Anyway,
And those of us serving gloved up.
Chris?
If I may, I'm remiss, I did not mention, one of my schools happens to be Washington, and I have been out there 3 times. The feedback I have from staff, and obviously I haven't had a chance to talk to all staff, has been very positive for the start of the school year. I've been there a couple lunch periods and walking the halls, and overall things look very positive right now. There are not any kids wandering the hallways. Staff is very appreciative of that, and so it's off to a good start, and they intend to keep it that way, and we should all feel good about that.
All right, then we will move on to district events. I know Stock the Box is Saturday. That's a fun event. I'm out of town, so I won't be there.
I think you can come by Lambeau from 10 to 1. The pep rally with high school bands starts at 11. It's very fun. And this is a great time if you haven't seen what they did at Titletown to bring the kids out. Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable how that park is just exploding, and it's just great things that Grandma was there, and she had her grandchildren there 3 times already. So, but it'll be a great time to actually Feed America. Feeding America is behind this in partnership with the Green Bay Packers and also Associated Bank, and of course the Green Bay Public Schools. And what Grace forgot to tell you is when the drum line went out, they went in the Red Smith area and they had the Red Smith Raptor in costume, dancing wildly, I might add, and I guess it's all over YouTube. I did see it, and whoever was dancing is quite the dancer. So that's something to behold. But it tells you how important it is and how creative the students are in making sure that we get a lot of non-perishable food items for our families that will support them through these cold winter months, and at the same time have some fun and the grant opportunities. The winner will receive $2,000 in grants for their music program. The runners-up each $1,000. So it's a great time out there. Our middle schools are participating this year as well, and that's a new thing. And there's some Green Bay Packer memorabilia and opportunities for the kids who are involved with that. And there's also a Packer alumni who's going to be out there on Saturday, but they won't tell us who it is. So they'll be out there with us and signing autographs, and see who it is on Saturday, I guess. So come on out.
Any other events anyone wants to announce? All right, then we will move to our system reports. First is teaching and learning, and that will be facilitated by Ed Dorff.
Thank you. And we just have one item there, Head Start program guidelines. And move that the Head Start Program Guidelines and Operational Procedures Handbook and Policy Council bylaws as presented be approved.
Second.
And we had a long, good report of what's in there last week, so we'll take a roll call. Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
And that's all we have.
That was quick. All right, next is organizational support. That will be facilitated by Andrew Becker.
All right. As with teaching and learning, we had detailed presentation about many of these items, including the 600 policies, many of which are important but very technical in nature. And although certainly there's room to stop for questions, it's if we don't have many were asked last week. I move that the resolution to enter in a performance contract with McKinstry Ascension LLC as presented be approved.
Second.
Did we talk about this last week?
This is the things that are new.
Yeah,
these
these
are
are
new.
new. All right. So nobody has any questions about this one? All right, Sandy?
Wagner?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
I move that the resolution for revenue limit exemption for energy conservation purposes and the amount of $7.058 million as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye. Carried 6-0.
I move that the annual budget operating policy 620 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
I move that the budget implementation policy as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Wagner?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move that the school funding sources policy and procedures for federal program grant application proposals rule as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Dorf?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
I move that the revenues from investments policy 652 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Janch?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move that the petty cash policy 662.2 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move that the cash and school buildings policy 664 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move that the expense reimbursements policy 671.2 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye. Carried 6-0.
I move that the procurement and purchasing policy, procurement methods rule, purchasing and bidding procedures rule, all under 672 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Wagner?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move that the suspension and disbarment of vendors policy as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
I move that the payment procedures policy as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Wagner?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move that the fiscal management and internal controls policy 681 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Dorf?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Janch?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move the financials, reports and statements policy 682 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Janch?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Move that the school properties disposal policy and rule 690 as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Change?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Under human resources, we had no.
We forgot
There's one more.
the federal states grants.
Oh, I move that the federal state grants procedures manual as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Change?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
Okay, as no separate human resources items, I will move the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sandy?
Dorf?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Change?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-0. We do have a closed session, so I'll read that notice. Special board meeting closed session has been scheduled for Monday, September 18th, immediately following the adjournment of the regular board meeting. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the investigations, to wit, personnel matters. Adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, personnel matters. The meeting will begin in open session to consider the appropriate motion for a closed session so provided by law.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Change?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye. Carried 6-0. We'll meet across the hall.